What's going on with your house, Keiko?
There's a cat. I don't know. Can you hear that in the background?
Yeah.
I heard one thing.
Okay.
You have a cat?
Well, we're watching a cat,
Oh,
and it wants me.
we all want you, Keiko.
That's okay. I think it's dead now.
Dead?
It should get dark real fast. All right.
I'm about to eat it.
Okay. Well, that's... Welcome to episode 26 of the Winning Hand Podcast, a podcast all about Marvel Champions, one card at a time. As always, I am your host, Boomguy, and I am joined today by my two loyal compatriots, Kaeko and Lazy Titan.
How's it going? Loyal to the end.
Love is in the air.
My two rides or dies.
I'll take die.
Yeah, you can be the... Yeah, you'll take die. Okay, so today we are continuing our exploration of Love Month. Love Month is where we are focusing on team-up cards, especially talking about the ones that feature romantic relationships. Today we are talking about Remy and Anna Marie LeBeau. They have the same last names because they are married. Last time I checked, comics, things get weird, but I think they're married still. So, at the start of every episode, I give a quick question to see if you guys know the answer. Do you all know the first team-up card that was released for Marvel Champions? Because team-up card was something that was introduced later in the game. It didn't start in the core set. Which card was the first one released? You guys know?
I gotta remember the waves.
I gotta remember what order because there's two. I'm
Don't overthink it. Don't Google it. Just pick one.
I'm gonna say Ant-Man because I think that one came out before Scarlet Witch.
Let's go with Iron Man and War Machine.
No, it was Ant-Man and Wasp. Swarm Tactics is the first one released. The Order and Chaos came out right after that.
This is why I picked die.
On the podcast today, we are going to talk about our wish list of team-up cards that don't exist, but we wish did. Then we're going to go through a quick discussion of how we've seen team-up cards used so far in the game as of February 2024. And then we'll go into a brief discussion about the card of the day, Beauty and the Thief. Can each of you give me a team-up card that does not exist, but you wish it did? Keiko?
So obviously I haven't played too many heroes, so there's not a whole lot I can say. I know I meme about it a lot, but Hulk and She-Hulk are two that come to mind right off the bat.
It's a good one.
Yep. And then the consistency with my character, the Web Warriors. There's a whole big thing about the trait of Web Warriors. We got Gwen and Miles, but that's about it. But the spiders play on each other so much, especially Peter. There's Peter and Flash Thompson's Agent Venom. Peter and Miles is a one that comes to mind, like a mentor kind of thing. So maybe that would be kind of my general wish list is the Hulks or like a Web Warrior pair up.
Well, I, of course, wish that Vision had a team-up card with Scarlet Witch. I mean, first of all, I love Vision. It's no secret. I'm a big fan. But also, they have a long romantic history in the comics, going back decades. Or they were married like in the 70s, I think. So it was a long time ago. They've had kids. There's been a lot of family drama. There's been some really good comics. The more recent Vision graphic novel that I read is really good. Vision and his family. So that was an obvious one for me. They also have an MCU show now. So I feel like they're pretty mainstream as a couple, even though it's a little weird in the MCU. Like they didn't quite explain why the witch and this android are like romantically entwined. It just kind of happened and was strange. But yeah, and I think if you were going to create a team-up card with the two of them, it should be something that plays on the family. So maybe you seek out another android or you seek out someone else related to them. I don't know exactly how it would work, but I feel like that's an obvious team-up card waiting to happen.
I agree. I have a question for you, and I guess a question for Keiko as well. For Keiko, you just pick one of the ones you mentioned, but do you have an idea for a name for that card? What would your Vision Scarlet Witch and what would one of your team-up card? What would they be? What would the name be?
Have to think on that for a while.
That is a good question.
You can come back to me later, but I feel like the names are always very like Beauty and the Thief is a great name.
That's such a good one.
Some of them are better than others, but like some of them are just say what it is, like Daughters of Thanos. Cool. But then there's some of them are good puns.
Yeah, I don't have a name. That's a good question.
I think within universe, it's kind of a little bit of running joke. The cheesy name of Spider Pals. I think I might just lean into that a bit for Peter.
if Peter Parker's involved, you can make it a dumb joke.
It also could be like, I don't know, you could play into the mentor aspect. Maybe it's Spider Mentor or
Spider-Man tour.
Spider-Man tour. I like that.
Okay, now you're getting punny.
Okay,
All right.
okay, but it's Spider-Man. You can get punny with Spider-Man.
Yeah,
That's true.
you'd make Peter Parker proud.
Lazy Titan, what's yours?
The first one I thought of was Captain America and Iron Man, because
Ooh.
I don't know as much about the comics, but they are on the same team in the comics, but they have the love-hate relationship of their teammates, but they're friends, but they disagree on things like the Civil War. That whole comic thing is about how they disagree on something, but they are friends in the end and do respect each other. And they're also sort of the leaders of the Avengers, sort of the two leaders simultaneously, co-leaders almost. And I think that could be cool. It could be sort of, I don't know exactly what you would do to combine them because they don't have very similar kits, but you could do something to do with Avengers even. You could just have like boost Avengers and it would be you two or something else. Or you could have it do...
Yeah, I like the idea of boosting other Avengers as like the leaders.
Yeah, or you could, I don't know, find a hero-specific event in your deck and put it in your hand or something. I don't know. Something that would evoke both, the leadership of Captain America and Iron Man together. And then the second one I thought of, which is diving even more into the theoretical, was She-Hulk and Daredevil, because obviously they're both lawyers, so that's the pairing. This is where the name thing came from, because I thought it would be called Attorneys at War. That was my pun.
Okay.
So I was wondering what else you guys could come up with. But so obviously Daredevil isn't real, so he doesn't even have a mechanic that I can base it on.
There's an ally.
Yeah, there's an ally, but the Daredevil hero isn't real, so there's nothing we can base that off mechanically. But I just thought that'd be a fun little combination, because I'm pretty sure they've worked together before on stuff like that in the comics.
Fists of Justice.
Works. I need one for Cap and Iron Man too. It's fun to come up with names.
Yeah, I feel like Cap and Iron Man, that could be something with the resources they care about. Like Cap generates fist resources and Iron Man cares about lightning. So you could have like, pull out a card out of your hand with those printed icons or something, or pull a card out of your deck.
Or it could be a double. It could be lightning and fist.
Or it could just be a double. Yeah, it could be something.
As well as doing something else.
Yeah, making team-up cards, maybe double resource, is actually a good idea to throw around, maybe.
That'd be kind of cool, yeah.
Or some of them. Because then there's more of a choice, right? Or it doesn't feel as bad. It's like,
you can't play it. It's still a double resource. That would make them pretty crazy.
Then you would just play it. Like I just play Swarm Tactics. If it's Double Genius, I just play it in my Ironheart deck for the Double Genius.
Yeah, then you'd just be spending it all the time. That's true.
Well, that's cool. Thanks for that little theoretical exercise. Now I want to talk a little bit about the team-up cards that we actually do have, not the theoretical ones, but how have we felt about how team-up cards have been used so far? Like we talked last time, there's 13 of them through a number of different cycles. We've got Avengers, Guardians, X-Men, Spiders, X-Force even. So how do we feel about how they've been used? Like, what do we feel about that design space? Do we want more of them? Which ones do we like the best?
I think they've been implemented well, but I think they haven't broken the mold with them enough. Like the first one was cool. It was like, oh, it's a team-up card. And then we got a couple, but they were all kind of the same format now. Like we have like sort of an established format of two heroes. It helps them both, probably readies them, costs about 1 to maybe 2 generally. And then it's always pairings, usually romantic pairings. I just wish they would do something different, like switch up maybe make it make it an upgrade, make it alliance card or something, like switch up the format of how they make them so it feels fresh.
Yeah, I agree. I think the format, in my opinion, is starting to feel a little tired. It was cool when it was novel. It's like, oh, like there's these things that, work with team ups that are like thematic, right? Ant-Man and Wasp and Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver came pretty quick. And then there was Rocket and Groot shortly thereafter. You felt like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then there was a lot of thematic pairings that didn't get them or that don't have them. And then they all started to just kind of feel like, I don't know, like you said, they're all kind of formulaic at this point. They're not doing anything crazy. We talked a little bit in the last episode about how they don't feel amazing to play most of the time. They're hard to get to the table. They almost feel like Nemesis sets in a way where you don't see them very often. And then once in a while they come out and it's like, oh yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
But in this instance, it's a player card. So I feel like you don't see them often enough. I kind of forget about them. I don't put them in a lot of decks because they're hard to make work. So they take up a spot that you could use for a card that hits more consistently. And I just think it needs to do something different. So I think it was last episode, I teased the idea of the alliance being used. And I feel like the alliance keyword is perfect for team up cards because it's literally a team up card. So it could still be used in solo, but that's a way to help pay for them. And they could have the per player cost, like some of the newer cards they've started playing with. So it could be 1 per player or 2 per player, whatever it ends up being. But they should feel really cool and they should do something really novel. Maybe it activates your abilities on your hero card or on your ally. Like a lot of the allies do cool things. Maybe you could activate that ability. I don't know.
And I think part of why it's kind of losing its novelty is because, and I think I mentioned this last episode too, the X-Men waves, pretty much all of them have a team up card, a team up pairing. So it's kind of just oversaturated, at least in the small window of release time.
It's definitely getting stale, I think.
Yeah, a lot of them are just ready the heroes, maybe heal some damage, etc., etc. They seem to follow a pretty consistent formula.
Yeah, they're like varying levels of power. Like Rocket and Groot kind of play specifically into their abilities somewhat, but then there's some where it's like, you ready? There's one where it's like, draw 3 cards. Oh, that's pretty good, but they don't really scale with each other the same.
Yeah. Is there a standout for either of you? Like one that you really like for whatever reason?
I mean, we talked about it last time. Sworn Tactics, I like, but as an Ant-Man card.
Yeah.
I like Beauty and the Thief, actually. I think that one's fun. And I feel like there's one more. Oh, Fastball Special. I like that one.
Yeah, a lot of people were excited about Fastball Special when it first came out, when it was announced. And I think it's solid.
It does 8 damage, right? I don't remember.
It does damage equal to the attack of Wolverine and Colossus when you exhaust them. So you exhaust them both, and it does their combined damage with Overkill and Piercing for 1.
It only costs 1. It is good. I think Colossus was the first hero to be involved in 2 team-up cards, right? He has one with Shadowcat as well. So that's kind of cool. I just think they need to do a little bit more for me than just ready the heroes or the characters and heal them or do a little bit of damage or something. I like the ones that are a little more creative.
I agree. For the limitations and the setup, it should be a bit more of a spectacle.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we talked about that last episode. They don't feel like, when I have it on my hand, I don't feel like, yes, I finally get this card. It often just feels like, usually I don't meet the conditions, so it's like, okay, I don't have both in play. And I don't plan on building around that card because there's only 1 copy per deck.
It's hard to build around.
Yeah. How do you feel about the 1 copy per deck?
Right now, it's in a bit of an awkward place because they're not that good and you can only have 1. I think if you up the power of them, it would be fair. And if you don't up the power of them, you shouldn't have it. Maybe 2 per deck for some of them. I also think that doesn't have to be a static rule. You could probably change that per card. So like Young Love, you could probably have 2 copies of, maybe even 3. But like 2 Against the World, you probably only have 1. Daughters of Thanos, probably only 1.
I mean, 2 Against the World, though, I was going to say that's when you could have 3 per deck if you want. It costs 3. Like it's not a cheap card. And so you search for a tech upgrade and put it into play. So you're basically paying the cost of the tech or over the cost of the tech to find it, put in play, and then you're ready. So it is a good card, but it does cost 3. Like it's not broken by any means. So I feel like you could put more copies of that in. I do think they're in a bit of a weird spot where they're not crazy powerful. They also can only have 1 copy in. It's a lot to get right in order to play it.
It's a lot of hoops.
I don't feel it's worth it often.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to suggest, was maybe bumping up the cost. That way you can put in more cards, because again, you either have a hard time finding that 1 card because you only have 1, let alone, if you're going to play that 1 card when you finally get it. So it's, I don't know, bump up the cost, have more in the deck, I think maybe.
Yeah.
Either up the effect or the amount you can have. They're incongruent right now.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of things that don't quite work. It's a cool design space. I really like the idea. I just don't think they've fully fleshed it out. I feel like they did a first draft and that's just what we have, and the proliferation of more of them hasn't really fixed that. There's just more of them, but they're basically the same thing. It's like, oh, you have, Jean and Scott, or you have Storm and Phoenix, and you can ready and heal a little bit. And that's cool. Like, that's good. But it's often just I find another card I would rather put in the deck.
Yeah, I think they could be improved. But I believe in them.
Well, I hope they do, and we will talk more about them in the next few episodes. This is only the 2nd episode of Love Month, so we will get through 2 more, and we'll have more to say about team-up cards. But today, let's talk about the one that Lazy Titan already teased that he was excited to talk about. Do you want to read the card for us, Lazy Titan?
The Beauty and the Thief is a 2-cost event. It has the attack and thwart traits. It is Gambit and Rogue's team-up card. And it is a hero action, attack and thwart. Deal 4 damage to an enemy and remove 4 threat from a scheme. And it provides a lightning resource when spent.
And as we always say, the art first. So this comes from Mr. and Mrs. X, Volume 1, number 12, and it was the cover in 2019. So this was released in the 1 copy in the Gambit pack and 1 copy in the Rogue pack. So there are 2 copies that exist of this card. And if you want tips or a deck idea for how to play it, our Dexpert, Lazy Titan, has a deck with this card built in the show notes below. So click that link, check it out. He always builds great decks. But for this one, the art on this card, I'm immediately kind of struck. I quite like this art.
I like it a lot.
I do too.
For those of you who can't see, because we are a podcast, it's Gambit and Rogue like kissing. He's wearing his brown trench coat, kind of classic. She's wearing some kind of a green hoodie of some kind. And there's all kinds of like pink streaks of energy, it looks like, coming out of the two of them. Their hair is kind of windswept. It looks like maybe there's cards flying out of Gambit's hand.
Yep, and there's no like background per se. There's kind of like a flash of light behind him. Yeah.
It's really cool.
I quite like it, actually, yeah.
Yeah, because it conveys a lot of emotion. Obviously, they're sharing a passionate moment, and that's kind of the energy flying off of them. And they're very clear in frame. They're in a rule of thirds too,
Yep.
if you know anything about composition and photography. So that's kind of cool to see in a card.
And the energy coming off of them is that pink, which we kind of classically associate with Gambit's energy, right? His cards and his explosive energy, whatever it's called. So it feels very like them. And I really, really like this art. I'm digging it a lot, which is in stark contrast to last time where I feel like I was kind of like on it.
Yeah, we're kind of on the fence. Like it did its job,
Yeah.
but
This is how to do it right.
This is great.
And also, again, in the last episode, we mentioned they should probably be custom. This one is not.
But it's so much better.
So I think they don't have to be custom art. I think the last one was just a poor choice.
Yeah.
that's fair.
This one is very cool.
And I also will have to say, I don't know if we mentioned this in the last episode, but it was called Swarm Tactics, which is very thematic. Cool name. This one, Beauty and the Thief, cool name again.
Excellent name.
So they're 2 for 2 on the names of these cards, in my opinion. I think this is really good.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned earlier. The names of the team up cards is fun, and they're important.
And it has an energy resource. So, that seems thematic too. It fits.
For Gambit and for Rogue.
How do we feel about the power of this card? 2 cost, you deal 4 damage and remove 4 threat. Thoughts?
It's great.
I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds amazing just from looking at it. It's not deal 3 damage or 2 damage, 3 threat, 2 threat. It's 4 and 4.
4 is good. 2 for 4 threat is good. 2 for 4 damage is okay. Putting them both together is great.
I mean, even 3 would have been good, but 4 is insane.
Yeah, 3 would have been good too.
I mean, 2 for 4 thwart is over the kind of cost curve, and 2 for 4 damage is about right on the cost curve of what you expect, I think. Now, when you take in effective resources, right, it's technically below, but the fact that you get both of them is really good. Now, the drawback, you have to be in hero form, and you have to have both of these characters in play.
However, they each have each other as their signature ally, and they're both pretty good.
And I think arguably these two would be played as heroes by multiple people versus like Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah.
So there's more chance maybe of having the two of these on the board.
Like Lazy Titan was saying, I think both of the allies are pretty good. So Gambit as a signature ally for Rogue is a solid one that you want to have in play usually, and he's one that stays in play, crucially for a team-up card.
So does Rogue.
Rogue also, Rogue I think can stay in play, but she comes and goes because she has a good effect when she enters play, right? She gets toughness, and she's very cheap because of the counters.
She's usually free.
So I think she comes and goes. Gambit deals damage based on counters on him, so he
sticks around.
generally when I play stays out there a little bit longer. But they're both good allies. So unlike Ant-Man and Wasp, where I think when you're Wasp, you don't really play Ant-Man ever. And if you're Ant-Man, you sometimes play Wasp. These two, I feel like you always I mean, Gambit and Rogue, you for sure always play Rogue.
Because she's usually free. And a free 2/2 with toughness and 3 health is crazy. She's so good.
So good. And Gambit's real good, too. I mean, Gambit, he's 2/2, also 3 health, and he comes in with charge counters, and every time he attacks, you remove a charge counter to deal a damage. So he attacks for 2 and then attacks again someone else. So that's really good, too.
Yeah.
So I think that helps.
The conditions, because last time we talked a lot about how difficult the conditions were and how hard it is. It's really just based on the characters, because Gambit and Rogue, you want to play their allies. The reason it was difficult for Ant-Man and Wasp is because their allies are kind of trash. And if you're not playing the heroes, you don't really want to do it. But Gambit and Rogue, you have an incentive because you're already probably going to play those allies because they're quite good.
Now, here's a rules question I have. Can you play this card if you are Rogue and the Gambit player is an alter ego?
No, for sure not.
So you would not be able to play this card if the Gambit player was an alter ego, because then you technically don't have Gambit in play?
No, because there's no character in play called Gambit.
Gotcha.
Interesting. So that's even more of an incentive that we haven't, or a limitation that we haven't pointed out last episode, is if 2 people are playing the heroes, they have to be in those hero forms,
which is even more limiting.
Yeah, because Gambit, he flips down quite a bit. But I think the Young Love card...
Oh, because it's Gwen and Miles.
...says Miles Morales and Gwen Stacy, but I think it works also in hero form. I think there was a rules question about that, and they confirmed.
That's another hard part to take into consideration for development, is all that wordplay.
Yeah.
But I think that gets better as they make the wording of cards more consistent. Early, the cards were worded kind of inconsistently, and they just kind of came up with rules. So I think as it gets better, that'll be easier to deal with.
It's getting better now.
If they were ever to do a Vision is Vision on both sides. So.
True.
Yeah.
So actually some heroes would be better for team-up cards because they don't change names. So a lot of the Guardians, like Gamora and Drax, if they had one.
And Nebula, yeah.
Would just be either way.
So Beauty and the Thief, let's get back to the card we're talking about today. How thematic is this? I don't feel a lot of theme here.
No, I'll give you that. I don't feel a ton of theme. However, I think I'm okay with that because it makes the card playable. The last one was complicated and didn't just do generically good stuff. So it was complex benefits and bonuses to the card, and there's a lot of ways you could use that, and there's a lot of ways you can't use that. This is just always good. So it lets me play this card more, which I like doing because it's very cool to look at.
I agree with you, Lazy Titan. I think what you just said is important. Like the last card we talked about, Swarm Tactics, there is a lot of theme there with changing your hero size and hero form, but it makes it more difficult to actually use consistently. Whereas this one, I feel like, is just generically good, but you already have enough hoops to jump through by having these 2 characters in play and then playing them. So I'm okay with it. The art is great. The theme, it's nothing particular about the Beauty and the Thief or about their characters. It's just generically good. It deals damage and thwarts.
That's a hard balance between, kind of tailoring it to the pairs versus the generic payoff.
I mean, I always like the theme in the game, but for the team-up cards, I feel like I want even more theme.
Yeah.
Because they're team-up cards, right? They're specific to this one hero. I feel like I want to have more theme in there, like I do with signature cards. But then the more thematic it is, the more difficult it can get mechanically, right? If it starts dealing with counters on Gambit, although the ally also has counters on Gambit, so you could do something with that.
What do you do for Rogue, though? Because you can't apply the touch thing. That's like her whole mechanic, and you can't do that with the ally.
She doesn't really do anything in the other one.
She's just generically good.
You could give her a status card, give her a tough card,
yeah,
and, put a counter on Gambit or something.
I feel like this is a good one because they're both very complex heroes and both very different that I think it's good to just find a middle ground of this is a good card. Call it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, because it's still like an action of the 2 of them doing something, but the action itself is generic. So it's not really an answer to all the team-up questions. It's all a balance, and it's hard to say.
Yeah, I like it, though.
Okay, so then how do we feel about the power and fun level of this card? How good is it, and how fun is it?
I think this card, we've already touched on it a little bit. It's very good. 2 for 4 and 4 is just really powerful. I also think it's very fun because it's a very pretty card, and it's fun to have in your hand and play it. And it's also got a good name.
Even though it doesn't really tailor specifically into the 2 of their gimmicks or what they do, it has that high payoff that we were looking for, as generic as it is. I hate to be inconsistent in that matter. Maybe there's some way to play into that, but no, ultimately what it does for the game is it helps you out quite a bit for damage, for threat.
I'm going to go say something crazy. I think it should cost 1.
What?
Yeah. I know that would make it really, really good.
Insane.
But that's what I want a team up card to be. Because again, like we keep saying, I already have to have both of these characters in play. So if I'm playing solo, I have to time it just right so that this card comes out right when I have the ally in play. Like that's not always guaranteed, right? There are different parts in the deck.
Yeah.
And if you're playing 2 heroes, it's more likely you'll get it, but you still have to find this card and be playing with 2 characters. Like, I don't know. There's just a lot of stuff you have to do to get to that point. And so it should feel like, yes, I got this in my hand. Instead of feeling like, okay, this is efficient, but I might have something else I want to do instead. Like I don't want to feel like, oh yeah, this is, if I math it out, this is an efficient card. I want to feel like I have it in my hand and I'm like, oh man, I cannot wait to slap this thing down. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I feel like 1 makes it feel like this is crazy good. 2 makes it feel like this is a good card.
I think I disagree. I think 2 is great for this. I think you almost always put like 2 for 4 is of crazy value. 1 for 4 is like Doctor Strange level stuff.
Again, it's so hard to play these. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to get this out a lot often.
Maybe that happy medium is increasing the max 1 per deck to max 2 per deck.
I like that.
It's a balance game.
I just feel like there's going to be a lot of games where you play one of them, and if you're playing solo, for example, or no one else at the table is playing the other character, and it relies on you finding the ally, you might actually never get it in play. It might be in your deck and it never comes out.
Yeah.
That may happen even if you're playing a 2-player game. One person's playing Gambit, one person's playing Rogue. You still might not get it out for whatever reason, right? You draw it and the villain makes you discard your hand, or you just have to play something else instead, or whatever.
What
like
if it was 1 cost and then 3 damage, 3 threat? Would that be...
I think that's a better scaling. I think 4 and 4 is a lot for 1.
I mean, I said in the last episode, I think as a rule they should all be 0.
Which I also said was crazy then.
That might be crazy. And maybe that means you bring it down, right? Maybe that means it's 0 for, I don't know, 2 and 2 or 3 and 3 or whatever it is. But if you have a rule that like team up cards are 0, it means at least when I have it on my hand, I'm always going to get it down. It's like, cool, 0 for 2 and 2. That's good.
That is very good.
Or maybe then it's 0 for deal 4 or thwart for 4. Like pick one.
I think there's definitely a way you can do it. You can't just make this card 1. I think that's too much. But I think you can definitely play around with that for sure and make something interesting happen.
Cards feel better when they're cheap.
Always.
Or maybe all the team up cards have 2 resource symbols on them.
I also like that. However, I think you have to make a rule then that you can only play it in the heroes listed.
Yeah, you can't include it in your deck at all.
I don't, maybe you can't, maybe that's already a rule, but otherwise you would just put, like, if I'm playing Domino, I'll just put all the team up cards in there because I get more doubles.
Yeah, because maybe team up cards should be like its own separate thing. Like you kind of mentioned like a Nemesis set in a way, or Doctor Strange's his own separate deck. I forget what it's called. Maybe that's what team up cards should do. They activate a separate deck. I mentioned that with Swarm Tactics. Ant-Man and Wasp get an army of ants as allies. Maybe there's something here that plays with counters and Rogue's Lifesteal and all that.
Yeah, I think you can't actually include a card in your deck if it's not legal to play. So I think you can't just put this in a Domino deck unless you have both of the allies in there somehow. There aren't basic allies.
There are not.
Yeah, I don't think you can include a card. Listeners, let us know. Drop a comment, send us an email, winninghandpodcast@gmail.com.
Put it in the comments.
Let us know if we're wrong, but I don't think you can include a card if it's not legal to play. Like you can include a Power of Protection in an aggression deck, for example.
Well, obviously you can't go out of aspect, but I don't know how it pertains to basic cards.
I don't think you could include, like, for example, Limitless Stamina in a Hawkeye deck because you can't actually play it. Or the one that heals an Asgard hero. I don't think you can play that.
I would need a rules clarification on that. Somebody help out.
Yeah, I'd have to double check the rules, but that's what I think. Anyway, so let's do some final score time. Lazy Titan, why don't you kick us off? What do you think about this card?
I think this card is very cool, and I'm going to give it an 8.5.
Whoa.
It's not perfect. One of my issues with it, which I also do kind of like, but it is kind of generic. There's no theme to it, really. That's a downside. It's also, team up cards are kind of hard to play, so I don't get to play it often, which is a downside because I really like the art on this card. I really like the way it looks, and it feels really fun to play. It just feels like a fun card. It sucks I don't get to play it more. and I wish I had the opportunity to use this card more than I do. But when I do get to use it, it's very powerful and it's very fun, and almost always will get played.
I think I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Okay, high scores here.
I love the art. I love the name. And I think I'd agree a little more with Titan on how balanced it is to cost for what you get. But I do think there is some wiggle room to play around with it. You know, whether it's 1 cost and you get 3 and 3, or it's still 2 cost, but you can put 2 in your deck. Like, there's still room to play around. The payoff argument that we had, I think this does have a really high payoff, but I would still like to make the argument that I want the team up cards to feel more thematic to the pair ups in mind. So this is just still a very generic action. I would like to see it play more into Rogue and Gambit as heroes, as a pair up, as a couple. So with the high payoff, I'd still like it to be thematic. With those into account, I'll give it an 8 out of 10.
We mentioned last episode of individualized team up cards. I almost think that would be better the more of these that we look at, so that the one that came in Gambit's pack interacted with Gambit, and the one that came in Rogue's pack interacted more heavily with Rogue. You still have to have them both in play, but it does more specifically things for them. Same with Ant-Man and Wasp. Obviously, it makes it more difficult because you have to create another new card then that's really only going to be used in one hero. So at that point, it's basically a hero-specific card. But I don't know. That might make the theme better.
I agree.
I'm going to give this card a 7 out of 10. I think it is good. I wish it felt a little better than it does. I want these team-up cards more generally to feel amazing when they're in my hand, and I would feel super excited that I get to play it and not just feel like they're efficient. But that's a minor quibble. The art is great. The name is great. We talked about all that. The other thing for me that's going to impact my ranking, and this is just a personal thing, I think these are my 2 least favorite X-Men to play. So it doesn't see a lot of use. I don't love Gambit or Rogue. Maybe that'll change over time. I have not played either one a ton, but I think they're the bottom of the X-Men rankings for me. So I don't see this card a lot. But great art, great name, solid ability. So 7 out of 10. Still good.
I respect that.
That is going to do it for us today. We will be back again next week to talk about the team-up card Young Love with Miles and Gwen. For now, thanks for listening. If you like the show, please consider sharing it with someone that you love that might also like the show. As they say, a podcast is best enjoyed as a team-up with friends.
Huh.
That's the thing people say.
I've heard that.
Gift this to your significant other. This is, give a marathon.
Yeah.
Winning Hand podcast marathon.
What your significant other really wants for Valentine's Day is this link in a text message so they can listen to the podcast as well. Show them that you love them.
They want to sit down and watch something together. This is what you're gonna. This is it.
You can take our word for that.
From all of us at Winning Hand, thanks for listening. Happy Valentine's Day, and we will see you next week with another episode. Bye, everybody.
Later.
Spider pals.